streaming a flight in the PMDG 737 from LAX to SFO. I'll be doing this in Prepar3D version 3. I'll be using Ground Services X, the PMDG 737 Active Sky, and PFPX for the flight planning. We won't be doing any radio communications, and I'll be talking through some of the procedures that I use to make it as realistic as possible. Though I won't be doing any radio, no pilot edge, no AI radio, no AI flight plan, just so I have some more time to talk. Okay, let's get started. So first things first, I've picked out a flight that I want to reproduce here on FlightAware. It's Southwest 4637 from LAX to SFO. It departed at 12:30 p.m. today, and we'll be using Active Sky to do historical weather so that their routing, their runway selections apply to us as well. It's a 737-700, which I've configured in PFPX. If you go to the aircraft database, you can see that I have a 737-700 configured with Southwest Airlines. If you edit it, basically all I did was I just went through the setup options here, so fuel, payload, and I just copied the numbers that are here into these values here to basically just get the weights lined up in both PFPX and the actual PMDG aircraft we're flying. It's linked to a TopCat landing and takeoff performance profile, so we'll be able to do takeoff and landing performance calculations, which will be excellent. And I think I have the engines correct, 7B20. We'll take a look at that later. But basically, the aircraft is all set up and ready to go. So the next thing to do is to plan the flight. So we'll be using Active Sky Weather. As you can see, I'm already in the pit in Prepar3D with, at the time, about 45 minutes prior to departure for this flight. So that should give us time to get set up and taxi and take off right about at the correct departure time. And I've got FS2 crew going as well. So we'll be using FS2 crew to do all the pilot, co-pilot procedures and crew resource management. So since I'm already in the pit in the correct aircraft, you can see it's a Southwest aircraft, and everything's ready to go. That means that Active Sky is loaded in the correct historical weather, and which is loaded into PFPX here. So we're ready to plan a new flight. So let's go ahead and add a flight, and then we'll just go through. This is Southwest. I forget their call signs. South. Yeah, damn it. Well, I know it's SWA here, so let's do SWA, and that's WN. Okay, so their IATA code is WN. Flight number is 4637. 4637. So their call sign is Southwest 4637. We're going from LAX to SFO. It's a domestic flight, and it is a scheduled flight. And our departure time, we're going to leave this stuff alone. This only really matters for real world weather. When I've got Active Sky historical weather loaded in, it's just going to use whatever that weather is. So we can leave all those fields alone. Registration is going to be B737 SWA, and we're going to use random passenger and cargo loading. So now we can save the flight and plan it. Okay. So basically, this is the planning screen. It's got a direct route loaded in right now, as you can see on the map section. We are going to just set our takeoff and landing runway. So as you can see here, it looks like the takeoff runway, this is Navigraph Charts Cloud here, by the way. That's a subscription service for flight simulators that gives you the Lufthansa charts that they use. So you can see here, if we kind of correlate what we got here with what we got there, it looks like they took off from 24 left. So we're going to set our takeoff runway to 24 left, and it looks like they landed 28 right. So we'll set our landing runway to 28 right. Now, of course, in real life, you don't get this information by looking at FlightAware. You get assigned it by the the tower will give you an expected runway, and then they'll finally clear you for a takeoff runway. But since we're doing a historical flight and I'm not using ATC, we're just going to do it with what we see on FlightAware. Okay, taxi out of 10 minutes and a taxi in of 5 minutes looks good to me. That's about accurate. And we go down to the payload. It's chosen a random payload for us, 113 adults, 3 children, 2 infants. PMDG doesn't support children and infants, so we'll just set those to 0. And it's going to be a fairly underloaded flight at 113 adults. So that's good. It'll mean a faster flight. And 2,700 pounds of baggage. Now, let's see. Let's go back to PFPX. Fuel, it's going to choose the domestic fuel. The U.S. domestic fuel requirements, so that's going to be the standard FAR Part 121 fuel requirements, including 45 minutes of holding. I would like to do a go around. So what I'm going to do on this flight to show you go around procedures is I'm going to pretend that a small child ran onto runway 28 right just before landing, and we'll do a go around followed by a return to the initial approach fix and a second approach. So I'm going to add a little extra time for that. I'm going to add another 30 minutes of time. And that should give us just a bit of extra fuel so that we can do the go around without dipping into our reserves. You can set up cost index calculations here. We're just going to use the standard Southwest airline cost index of 36. If you wanted to calculate a cost index, you can do it with these things here. But I saw on the web that Southwest for their 737s typically uses a cost index of 36. We're going to do that. For our route, well, first of all, let's go ahead and do the find destination alternates, which, as you can see here, it's filling in some alternates. Oakland, Hayward, Moffett, and San Jose. We'll use Oakland as our alternate. It's a perfectly good alternate. And now it wants us to find a route automatically, but we don't have to do that because we've got a route here that we can just paste in from FlightAware. So the dark 1 departure, Stoked transition to Surfer, and then the Surfer 2 arrival from there. So we paste that in, we click build route, and then as you can see here, it's gone ahead and built us a route. Here's the dark 1 departure to Stoked, and then to Surfer, and then here's the Surfer 2 arrival to SFO. And then it's selected for us routing to the various airports. And you can see here the routes, the various alternate airports. You can see there the routes. Okay, that's about it. The next thing is to do compute flight. That's where it does all the fuel and time calculations. And now the flight's computed. What we can do now is do our takeoff and landing performance calculations beforehand using the known 0 fuel weights that we have. So let's do our takeoff calculations. It knows our takeoff weight, and it's going to choose a flap and thrust configuration for us. We will have air conditioning on. It's a nice hot day. We don't need anti-ice. The weather is no factor. I should say I've already done a weather brief for this flight. Weather is absolutely no factor. It's beautiful and clear all the way up to the California coast. So we're not going to worry about weather at all during this flight. Anyways, you can see winds are calm, temperature, pressure, and we got runway 24 left. The runway condition is dry. There's no rain. So we just go ahead and calculate. And then it is calculated that we will be doing a flaps 1 takeoff. We'll be using D-rated thrust. So a takeoff 1 D-rate, I believe that's an 18,000 pound D-rate, but I'll see once I get in once I unpause the game and get in the sim. And then for an assumed temperature, it has chosen an ideal assumed temperature of 45 degrees Celsius. Just briefly, obviously, D-rate is just a flat thrust reduction. Normally, the CFM 75s can generate 26,000 pounds of thrust, I believe, and then you can derate them to 22 or 18,000 pounds of thrust. In addition, you can choose an additional flex temperature, is what it's called, a D-rate based on an assumed temperature. Basically, we pretend that it's actually 45 degrees Celsius out, and we D-rate as if we were taking off at 45 degrees Celsius. And so it's chosen a 45 degrees Celsius, and it says here that the limiting factor is obstacle clearance. That's why we can't go above 45 degrees Celsius for a D-rate. Anyway, that's the maximum D-rate, and then that produces a total thrust value of 88%. Remember, that's 88% off of the existing takeoff, the existing TO1 D-rate that we're choosing. So 88% of that total D-rate is the minimum thrust that we can use to take off and meet our climb requirements. And of course, we do these D-rates to increase the life of our engine and to reduce mechanical wear and tear. And then it's given us a engine out procedure here. So if we have a single engine out after V1, we would make a right turn to RAFs and then hold at RAFs 260 degrees inbound. And it's chosen that engine out procedure so that we have the lowest obstacle so that we can use the highest flex temperature here. And remember, obstacles are the limiting factor. Any higher, and we wouldn't be able to outclimb obstacles. You can see here our V speeds. V1 is 128. V rotate also at 128, and V2 is 130. V1 is the maximum speed that we can abort. So it's our maximum abort speed. So if we have a single engine failure at or below V1, we will abort. 120 is our rotation speed, and 130 is our V2. That's our takeoff safety speed. So if we do have an engine failure, 130 knots is going to be our climb speed to get us above any obstacles. You can see our takeoff distance here, 4,500 feet. Sorry, that's our takeoff margin. So that's remaining runway at rotation point. And that's about it. So now we basically just append that data to the scratch pad and apply it to our flight plan. And we can do the same for landing. Obviously, we'll recalculate landing when we get closer to the airport. But for now, it's giving us an assumed landing weight. We typically use full flaps for all landings. So we'll use flap 40. It's going to be a manual landing. Typically, pilots are not allowed to use auto land except for instrument conditions or training purposes. So it'll be a manual landing. Again, we don't need anti-ice. Air conditioning will be on. And it has our landing runway long, so actually, or wrong. So let me close that, go back to replan, and let's just make sure, yes, 28 right is selected as our landing runway. So we'll recompute, reapply the takeoff data, append it, and whoops, apply it. And then for our landing data, now it's got 28 right selected. Okay, so we'll calculate it, and then let's see what it's got for landing. So for landing, flaps 40, and it's given us a VREF of 122 knots, so that's our speed we'll use for landing. And for braking, it is suggested max manual braking. That is a hefty amount of braking. Maximum manual is typically something where you'd have to have a mandatory gear cool down procedure, or maybe even fire equipment standing by. So we will not be doing that. You can see that that even gives us a margin of 9,000 feet, which is most of the runway. The auto brake settings, auto 1 is a nice gentle auto brake, all the way to auto 3, which is a pretty firm auto brake. You almost never see that in real life. And then auto max is a very firm braking. Auto 1 gives us a margin of 5,500 feet. The only reason we would select between these typically is if we wanted to make it off by a certain point on the runway. I'm not going to get into that though, so I'm just going to choose auto 1. Even though it's not the quote recommended, because it still gives us a 5,500 foot margin. And so what if we have to do a little back taxiing? Okay, so we can append that to the scratch pad and apply it to the flight plan. And here we have our flight plan. I'm going to set it to Southwest format. So this is the dispatch sheet that Southwest uses, and I'll re-update the performance data. And so as you can see, it's a IFR flight plan from LAX to SFO with an Oakland alternate. And then it gives us our takeoff performance, flaps 1 for takeoff, runway 24 left. Here's our fuel breakdown, or sorry, here's our filed route. And so it's dark 1 stoked, surfer 2 arrival, 450 knots in the cruise. And here is our fuel information. So our reserve fuel is 45 minutes, 3,100 pounds. And our total fuel on board is 9,300 pounds. Here's our takeoff weight, here's our zero fuel weight, and that's below our maximum zero fuel weight. Maximum landing weight is 154,000 pounds, and our takeoff weight is 118,000 pounds. So our takeoff weight's below our maximum landing weight, so we don't need to hold if we have to have an immediate return to the field. So that's good to know. Okay, planned arrival fuel, 6,000 pounds. The average wind is a headwind, minus 11 knots. What do we got here? Here's our takeoff data. So takeoff weight, flat. It looks like the formatting got a little messed up there. That's okay. We can just get that information from the scratch pad too, since I pasted that information there. And then here is our route data. So here's all the fixes in our routes. And then here's the distances. Second column's the distances. Third column's the courses. Fourth column's the flight level. You can see climb, climb, climb to flight level 400, then descend, descend, descend. Outside air temperatures, and here's our wind components. These also don't look like they're formatted correctly. I may switch to a different flight plan format since it looks like the Southwest one's a little buggy. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So I've got a flight plan format that I built that I know a little bit better, that has all the information that I need. So I'm going to use this instead. So here you can see we've got, yeah, these are correctly formatted wind values, correctly formatted temperature values here and here, flight levels, distance, fuel. It's just a pretty typical flight plan. Anyway, with that done, I think it's finally time. We could click release flight, but no need. That's usually only used if you're actually simulating airline operations. What we will do, however, is we will export the route data for prepared, so that we can just load it up automatically and pretend as if the route was, transmitted via satellite to the aircraft like they do in real life. Okay, so we're almost ready to actually start the pre-flight. So what I'll tell you first is that the 737 FS2 crew, the reboot of FS2 crew, simulates a very fast pre-flight cadence to simulate real-world operations. They give you 3 SOPs, 2 simulating major American airlines and 1 simulating a major European airline. I'll be using SOP 2 since it's the one I'm most familiar with. And that SOP gives you 25 minutes to do the full pre-flight. So it's not a lot of time, so we'll be moving quickly through it. I'll explain as much as I can along the way. I'm about ready to unpause it, and let's go ahead and do this. So first, before I actually unpause it, let's set up the departure brief beforehand so that the co-pilot can get all the switches right. So we will be pushing back from a gate. ADSD ASDX is supported at LAX. It's going to be a derated thrust with assumed temperature. Takeoff flaps was 1. This is not an overwater flight. Bleeds are on. Anti-ice not required. We can ignore this. I'll be doing my own takeoff brief, so we can ignore all of these things. Those are just for the automated takeoff brief. We will be using noise abatement departure procedure 1. I'll go over that in a bit. Okay, cool. This is all set up. So let's go to the pre-flight events page, unpause the sim, and click run.
Okay, let's get this show on the road.
Okay. All right, so first things first, let's turn on the battery and let's hook up the ground power on the ground connections page. Ground power is available, pitot cover is removed.
Just heading out for the walk around.
He's out for the walk around, ground power is on. Okay. Now I can do my preliminary flight procedure. So after 30 seconds after power on, I can turn on both IRUs. So let's turn those on. Then we'll test the voice recorder. It's operating. We'll test the flight recorder. It's operating. Okay. Service interphone switch, that's used to communicate with ground crew. We'll make sure that's off. Engine panel set. Both electronic engine computers are on. Mach overspeed test. Let's test those. On the left, on the right. And the stall warning test isn't going to work until we've got power on the buses for 4 minutes. So we'll delay that. And let's go ahead and get the ATIS. This is the only time we'll be using the radio.
Los Angeles Airport information, hotel 1847 Zulu, wind calm, visibility greater than 20 miles, sky conditions clear, temperature 30, dew point 3, altimeter 2989er, visual, runway 7 flat visual, runway 7 right visual, runway 6 right hand visual, runway 6 flat in use, landing and departing, runway 7 left, runway 7 right, runway 6.
They say they're using runway 6, but that's of course just Prepar3D, not really calculating the fact that most airports will not switch opposite direction traffic unless there's a really strong tailwind. So we can ignore that, but the altimeter we should set, it's 29er, 89er. Let's go ahead and set it. 29er, 89er on the primary and 29er, 89er on the standby. Okay. So now we're going to begin our Cdu pre-flight. This is where we enter in all the data that we flight planned, basically. I'll bring up the Cdu. We'll start with the position. Actually, first let's verify. So we've got a 24,000 pound engine. I was wrong about 26, sorry. It's 24,000 pounds of non-derated thrust. Let's start the position initialization. So we need to initialize the IRS. We're going to do that, initialize it with the GPS position. We'll just pick GPS left, copy that into the scratch pad, put it in as IRS position. To verify that, we'll put in LAX as our reference airport and verify that it lines up. Yeah, it's more or less correct. Okay, date and time are correct. So now we can go to the route page. So we're going to use LAX as our origin. It's automatically put in the scratch pad, but we can load a company route of LAX-SFO 01. Execute it. Let's verify the route. It says direct to Surfer, then Surfer to direct. And then the Surfer to arrival. So it hasn't, it doesn't load the departure and arrival, but it does load the fixes, which we've got. So we can activate that route and execute it. And now we can load our departure and arrival. So we'll go to departure arrivals, LAX departure. We're going to use the dark 1 departure with a stoked transition from runway 24 left. And if we go to the route page, it has dark 1 transition to stoked, then it has a disco, doesn't know how to get to Surfer, and if you remember from our route, it's just direct to Surfer. So we'll move that disco out and then go direct, and we'll hit execute. Now the arrival, SFO arrival, it was the Surfer 2 arrival to runways 28. And then even though we won't be using the ILS, we'll load it in just so we have some guidance for 28 right. It wants to know the transition. If we go to the Navigraph charts and we open up KSFO and we take a look at the Surfer 2 arrival. Sorry if you're not used to these Lufthansa charts. It's the only thing I got for flight simulation. Where is the Surfer? Surfer 2. You can see that it takes you to Menlo, and Menlo is actually, if you look at the ILS or localizer 28 right, Menlo is actually an inbound, or it's a transition fix. So we'll use Menlo. That should be able to take us right there without any sort of vectoring. And if you look on the route page, you will see, yes, Surfer and then Surfer 2 to Menlo, and then an approach transition to 28 right. Obviously, in real life, you would be doing this, but you would kind of just be guessing at what you would get, and you would expect to change it once you're in the air and closer to the destination, and they actually give you your arrival and approach. So let's go ahead and execute it, and let's set up our alternate destinations. The only one I'm going to plug in is Oakland. You could plug in all of them if you wanted, but let's just save some time. So then we go to Oakland and we say it's a missed approach transition, and the altitude we'll be using we can get from the flight plan, which has, where is that? Oakland. It's going to say 3,000 feet is the altitude we want for the transition, for the missed approach. So we'll do that. We'll leave the winds alone for now. We can do that later if we need to. So let's continue the performance initialization. So 0 fuel weight we can get from the, we can get 0 fuel weight here from our flight plan. Where is it? I promised you guys I was familiar with this, but where the hell is it? 0 fuel weight. Planned 107.6. Oh, sorry, before I keep going, let's get the ground services going. So we'll request catering.
The security and safety checks are all done. Can we start boarding now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right, boarding's going to start. And then let's get boarding or refueling and boarding going. Okay, I should have done this earlier. The ground services X is not quite going to line up with FS2 crews boarding, so but we'll get it all figured out. Okay, reserve fuel. Let's go back to the flight plan, take a look at our reserve fuel. Here's our FAR reserve fuel. It's 3.1. So let's dial that in. Cost index, as I mentioned before, was 36. Cruise altitude was flight level 4,000. And then the average cruise winds are here somewhere. Somewhere they're here. Here we go. Average winds 280 at 13. And it's going to use this, of course, for time and performance calculations. Average temperature is -60 at our cruise altitude.
Back on the walk around, no issues.
Let's keep this party going because we are running out of time. So let's go to the thrust limit. So as we mentioned in the In the takeoff, it's going to be a takeoff 1 D rate, which is a 22K D rate. You can see that here, with an assumed temperature of 45 degrees Celsius. So we'll just dial in 45. And that gives us a red line of 92%. For the climb, it's automatically chosen climb 1. For a D rate, we'll use that. And then we can go to the takeoff page. So if we go to the next page, we can enter in the runway wind. It's calm, so we'll leave that alone. For noise abatement departure procedure 1, again, I'm going to get into that in a bit. Basically, it's a thrust reduction. It's a thrust reduction of 1,000 feet. Oh, sorry. One thing I didn't do was input the fuel. We haven't actually put fuel in the jet, so we've got to tell it how much we plan to put in, and the total fuel at release is 11.4. So we got to do that, or else all this is going to be wrong. There we go. So now we can go to the takeoff page, and wind is calm. So sorry, a noise abatement departure procedure 1 is a thrust reduction at 1,000 feet and an acceleration at 3,000 feet. And ground services wants me to open both right entries. And if we go to the external view, you can see that the food services are waiting to come, and they will be pulling up momentarily, and everything else is ready to go. Yeah, see, you can see that guy walking in, getting our food. Okay, so we go back to the previous page on the takeoff. It was a flaps 1 takeoff, which we can see, where was he? It's here, flaps 1 takeoff, and automatically calculate the CG at 22.4% for a trim of 5.5. That should give us a V1 128, 128, 130, and 124, 125, 130. So the calculations are a little bit off. We'll use the calculations by the FMC. It really doesn't make too much of a difference. Just PFPX and the FMC have slightly different calculations. Okay. That's all good. So we're basically done. The only other thing we can do is we can enter in winds at each leg. And so for Splint and Stoked, it will allow us to enter in the winds at those for more accurate flight planning. So at Splint, it's 247 at 27. And at Stoked, it's 248 at 27, which is more or less the same. So we can just do that. Slightly accurate, more accurate flight planning. And the other thing we can do is do our descent forecast. So I'm going to pause and do that because we're starting to run out of time, because I still have to go through the whole pre-flight procedure. So our descent forecast is here. So at flight level 310, winds are 280 at 27. So 280 at 27. At flight level 230, it's 303 at 21. Yeah, that should work. And then at 15,000, it's 321 at 12. Okay, that'll give it a better idea of where top of descent is, and we can execute that. All right, we're ready to start the pre-flight events. Okay, pre-flight procedure, master light test. Let's do that. Just go look, make sure all the lights are working. There's no way that I'm checking all the lights, but sure. And the EFIS control panel, we'll turn on the flight path vector. Make sure that barometric is set to inches and not European units. And map mode is set correctly and properly. Okay. And weather radar is off. Okay, MCP set. What does it want? Close, right entry, forward. Right, let's do that. Menu, sections, doors, right entry, forward. Okay. MCP set courses. So let's go back to LAX. And let's go to the ground chart. Let's just close after. Okay, ground chart says that runway 24 left is 251, so we'll set course 251. And we'll just be using this for situational awareness. It's an RNAV departure, so we won't actually be using the radio. And we'll set heading 251, so we'll set the bug to runway heading as well. And we'll tell him to set his course. Set course on your side 251. Set course on your side 251. He's not listening right now. We'll do it for him. We're gonna be nice. Okay. And then for the VOR is 113.6. That's the Los Angeles VOR. And again, this is for situational awareness only. We're not actually flying the VOR. It's an RNAV departure. Okay. And then we want to set, per the noise abatement departure procedure, specifies a climb at V2 plus 10. So if we go back to the takeoff page, V2 is 130, so we'll set the climb speed to 140. And altitude, normally we would set this to our initial cleared altitude, but since we're not doing radios and I'm not getting a clearance, we're just going to go ahead and set this all the way up to our cruise altitude of 40,000, just so we have an uninterrupted climb. Oxygen test, so we'll test the oxygen mask, and then in 100% oxygen mode, test works. Disengage lights test, we'll test both disengaged circuits for the autopilot and auto throttle disengage lights. Flight standby instruments check, 45 knots and 0, and effectively 0. Level and level, uncaged, 140 feet at 29er, 89er, 140 feet. Compare that with the airport elevation of 130 feet. Okay. And heading 080, 080, and 080. Flight instruments all check out. Parking brake, set it. Radio tuning panel is set. Trims, let's check them. So aileron trim to the left, aileron trim to the right. And center it up just a bit to the left. There we go. No, right. Real stickler about the trim. Okay. Rudder trim, check it to the left, to the right, and centered. Okay. And then elevator trim. And we can set it to our trim value of 5.5. That's the calculated takeoff trim value. There we go, 5.5. Okay, flight plan. Let's verify it. We'll skip that actually because we got to get to the checklist, so let's do it. Pre-flight checklist.
Pre-flight checklist. Oxygen.
Tested 100%.
Tested 100%. Navigation, transfer and display switches. Normal auto. Window heat on. Pressurization mode selector auto. Flight instruments.
Heading 080. Altimeter 2989.
Checked. Parking brake.
Set.
Engine start levers.
Cut off.
Pre-flight checklist complete.
Okay, so it wants us to refuel, so let's go ahead and do that now. Let's go to menu page, FS Actions, Fuel, and what was our plan? Release fuel was 11,420. So let's, boom, 11,420 pounds on board, world's fastest refuel. Okay, it's time for the departure brief. So, are you ready for the departure brief?
Go for it.
All right, I'll be doing the brief myself. Okay, we have no MEL issues for this flight, no significant weather. We're expecting runway 24 left for takeoff. It'll be a full-length takeoff, standard takeoff. I'll be the pilot flying. We'll be using flaps 1 for takeoff. Anti-ice will be off. Engine bleeds will be on. We'll be using noise abatement departure procedure 1, which specifies a full derated thrust climb to 1,000 feet, and then an acceleration from 1,000 to 3,000 feet at a reduced thrust, followed by flaps reduction at 3,000, flaps up at 3,000 feet, and an increased to climb thrust. No terrain or emergency turn factors. We'll be taking off over the water. We can turn in any direction. There's a higher terrain for a right turn than a left turn. Minimum safe altitude is about 2,000 feet. Transition altitude is going to be 18,000 feet. Our departure procedure is going to be a dark 1 departure stoke transition. We'll be using the autopilot after takeoff once gear and flaps are up. That'll be in LNAV and VNAV autopilot modes. Radio aids, I've got LAX in nav 1 and nav 2 for situational awareness only. The FMC is pre-flighted, and our return alternate is going to be LAX. Emergency takeoff brief will be as follows. From brake release to 80 knots, I'll abandon the takeoff for any malfunction called by any crew member. I'll call reject, close both throttles. You will confirm automatic speed brake deployment and automatic auto brake system. If the auto brake does not work, you'll call it out, and I will call manual braking and apply maximum symmetrical braking. I'll apply maximum symmetrical reverse thrust. We'll bring the airplane to a complete stop on the runway. Once we've made a complete stop on the runway, we'll decide as to a further action. From 80 knots to V1, I will only abandon the takeoff for engine failure, engine fire, takeoff configuration warning horn, predictive wind shear warning, or any other condition that may make the aircraft unsafe or unable to fly. At and above V1, we will take the airplane into the air. The only actions I need from you are to confirm the failures and silence the bells. At 400 feet, I will call for, at 400 feet, you'll perform the the engine failure checklist, and I will perform the memory items. At 1200 feet, I will call for altitude hold, and we will make a decision as to continue or land. We are below the maximum landing weight, so we can return to the airport immediately. Any questions?
No question.
Okay, wants me to open the left door to load the passengers, so let's do that now. It's open, but it's not. That's a little bug. I gotta reopen it. Okay, that sounds the load sheet coming in from the printer.
Here's the load sheet.
Thank you. Okay, so we got the load sheet, which means we know our final gross weight, and we can do our final V-speed. So let's go ahead and load up those passengers virtually. So what is our final zero fuel weight? It was 107.6. So let's load that in. Boom. Okay.
Watch out for your leg, please.
6. Okay. So it doesn't line up exactly with what the passengers and cargo here, but I like the zero fuel weight to be accurate. That's more important. Okay, so he's setting the trim, and now we can verify our takeoff speeds.
Takeoff speeds. Confirm you're happy.
Verified.
Check.
We haven't actually verified the takeoff speeds. I'm just confirming he's happy. So 107.6 is our zero fuel weight. And now we can go ahead and verify our takeoff speeds. 124, 125, and 130. And that lines up with 128, 128, 130. Close enough. Okay, so it's all verified. And we can continue the brief. FMC is configured with the actual zero fuel weight. Our N1 is going to be 91.2% V speeds. V1's 124, rotate 125, V2's 130. Flaps 1, CG is 22.4% for a trim of 5.5, which is set. Okay, briefing complete. Let's do the before start procedure. Again, sorry, this goes quickly. So, told card, we verified our takeoff data, and performance data is entered. We can turn on the flight director and auto throttle now. IAS is set to V2 plus 10. LNAV and VNAV, let's activate those. VNAV won't activate.
A very warm welcome to you all. My name is Jasmine, and I'm your cabin supervisor on your flight today.
The flaps.
We would like to extend a warm welcome to our frequent flyers and guests from other international partner airlines. So we can depart as soon as possible.
And initial heading and altitude are set. Close and lock flight deck windows. Can't even open them. They're closed. We verified, so now we can do our before start checklist to the line. Before start checklist to the line.
Before start checklist to the line. Fuel 1.4 thousand pounds. Pumps on. Passenger sides on. Windows.
Locked on the left.
Locked on the right. MCP.
V2 140. Heading 251. Altitude 40,000.
Checked. Takeoff speeds.
V1 124. VR 125. V2 130. V2 130.
Checked. Cdu Pre-Flight.
Completed.
Completed. Rudder and aileron trim.
Free and zero.
Taxi and takeoff briefing.
Completed.
Before start checklist completed to the line.
Okay, we've completed the checklist to the line. The rest of the before start checklist happens after pushback. That's called below the line. We'll do that next.
Happy to turn on the APU?
Yes, please.
Starting APU.
Okay, he's starting the APU for the engine start. All right, we've got just 4 minutes left here, so a little bit of time. Let me review the noise abatement departure procedure. So we're using NADP 1. That's a standard noise abatement departure procedure. The way it works is we'll be using takeoff thrust, which is 91.2%. That's our derated takeoff thrust, and a climb at V2 plus 10, so 140 knots. And we will do that up to 1,500 feet AGL. Did I do 1,000? Yeah, sorry, 1,500 feet AGL. That's our thrust reduction altitude. And then we will reduce our thrust to a noise-friendly reduced thrust value, and we will climb at that reduced thrust and V2 plus 10 to 3,000 feet AGL. That's our acceleration height. From there, we will climb at climb speed, which is 250 knots, and climb thrust, and we will accelerate, bring up the flaps. Okay, so that's our plan. All right, we're just waiting for the doors to close and the boarding to complete. If we check the U-control window, it looks like everything's done and it's just ready for pushback and departure.
APU on the bus.
APU's on the bus. So we are just waiting for the forward entry door to close. Once it's closed, we'll finish up the before start checklist, and then we will do the pushback and start. Again, of course, if we were doing radios, we'd be talking with the pushback, the gate controller to get our pushback clearance, and he'd probably give us an estimated time window when we can do our pushback and blah, 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 but we're not doing any of that. Okay. Let's just hang out for a bit. I guess we can verify the fixes is another thing we can do. If we go to the chart for LAX and we go to the dark, actually we can do a taxi prep. So we're here at Terminal 2 and we're going to 24 left. Normally, of course, we get our taxi clearance, but we can expect Delta 9, Delta, Echo. Actually, probably we'll just do, since that's, we'll just do Delta 9, Echo. So that'll be our taxi route. And then we can also take a look at the dark 1 RNAV. That's the wrong page.
Hi guys, all passengers are on board. Are we clear to close?
Clear to close, short taxi.
Thanks, let me know if you need it.
Okay, we're just waiting for the doors to close. And runway 24 left. For dark, it's going to be heading, I'm just looking down here and here, heading 251 to 640 feet, direct to Del Rey, then to Any, then to Nac, then to dark. So the fixes are all correct. And then for the transition, take a look at the next page. For the transition to stoked, it's going to be fix it, Akaye, risen, splint, stoked. Okay, good. Fixes are all correct. All right, doors are shut. Let's do the rest of the before start checklist. Below the line.
Flight deck door closed and locked. Anti-collision light on. Before start checklist complete.
Okay, gates pulled back. We are ready for pushback and start. Let's turn on the service interphone so we can talk to the ground crew. We're not actually going to talk to them, but just for realistic, and prepare for pushback and departure. And we want to go nose left, and we will not be starting before pushback. Okay, pushback truck is coming up.
Hello, Captain. We are ready for pushback. Locking gear.
All right, he's going to insert the bypass pin to lock the gear, and then he'll have me release the parking brake and he'll start the push. The bypass pin prevents me from controlling the nose gear with the tiller wheel here.
Departure check completed. Bypass pin inserted. Release parking brakes.
Brakes released.
Commencing push. All engines clear. Start that wheel.
So normally you wouldn't get the all engines clear till you're at least a little bit further back from the gate. That's kind of a shortfall in GSX, so we'll just wait a bit, and then we will start our engines. Okay, let's go ahead and start our engines. Start sequence is 2, then 1.
Check.
Start engine 2.
Starting 2.
Okay, so he's going to turn on the start switch, and we're going to watch the N2 gauge here. When it reaches 25%, we'll bring in the gas. Meanwhile, we don't have to worry about the pushback because we got wing walkers on either side of us. All right, N2's coming up. Okay, there's 25, add the gas. Should see the fuel flow come up here. There it goes, fuel flow's coming up, EGT's coming up. N1 should come up soon. There it goes. Next thing we're looking for is oil pressure to come off the peg. And oil pressure is coming up. Okay, good start. Now what we just have to do is monitor EGT, make sure it doesn't redline. If it hot starts, we'll cut the fuel. And let me just, it's master caution we can get rid of.
Starter cutout.
Okay, engine 1 started. We'll wait until they finish to start engine 2.
Set parking brakes.
Brake set. He's going to remove the bypass pin, clear us left and right, and then they're going to take off and we can start the second engine.
Unlocking gear. Tow truck disconnected. Bypass pin removed.
Okay, in real life, he would walk up to the co-pilot side here and he would show the co-pilot the bypass pin so that the co-pilot can
Left is
confirm
clear. Right is clear.
that we have control of the jet. So that's him showing us the bypass pin. Co-pilot would nod his head or whatever. All right, left and clear, right's clear. Let's start engine 1. Start number 1.
Starting 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence the safety
All right, same
demonstration.
procedures.
Each aircraft may be different, so we'd appreciate your attention to the TV monitor closely.
All right, there's 25% on N2. Add the gas. See the gas. EGT is coming up. N1 increasing and oil pressure increasing. That's a good start.
Starter cutout.
Okay, 2 started engines. All right, now we tell, now we call for takeoff flaps. Flaps 1.
Flaps 1.
And we do our before taxi procedure, which is basically just check the flight controls. We'll wait for him so that he can verify our flight control check, and then we'll do our flight control check, and then our before taxi checklist. All right, let's check our flight controls. Full left, center.
Check.
Full right, center.
Check.
Full up, center.
Check.
Full down, center.
Check.
Full left, center.
Check.
Full right, center.
Check.
And we'll verify we have our dispatch clearance again, a real life thing. Dispatch clearance.
Confirmed.
Before taxi checklist.
Before taxi checklist. Generators on. Propane on. Anti-ice off. Isolation valve auto. Engine start switches continuous. Recall checked. Auto brake. RTO. Engine start levers.
Idle detents.
Flight controls.
Checked.
Dispatch clearance.
Checked.
Checked. Before taxi checklist complete.
Clear on the left.
Clear right.
And now we go. Just needs a bit of thrust to come off the brakes, and then you can pretty much take it back down to idle. Obviously, since it's a bigger aircraft, you have to oversteer, which means you have to drive past the point where you normally think you want to steer, because the nose wheel is actually aft of you. Okay, reviewing our taxi routing. It's just Delta 9 to Echo. 2, 2 for left. Okay, we're going to do a really quick takeoff review before we do the before takeoff checklist. So let's do that. Are you ready for the departure review?
Go for it.
Flaps 1, runway 24 left, V speed set, climbing to 40,000. Any question?
No question.
And now we can start the before takeoff checklist. Before takeoff checklist.
Before takeoff checklist. Flaps.
Flaps 1, 1, 1, green light,
Stabilizer trim.
5.4 units.
Before takeoff checklist complete.
That 111 refers to the 3 places where you see the flap position. On your takeoff performance data, on the indicator, and on the handle. Okay, normally you turn on the weather radar just before takeoff, but because weather's less of a factor than terrain,
The cabin is secure.
I'm going to turn on the terrain. Cabin's secure now. Okay. I'm gonna pause here and explain what's going to happen for takeoff, because it's going to happen quickly, and I don't want to be talking through it. So basically, before we get to the runway, I'm going to call for the runway entry procedure, and then I'm going to bring the thrust levers up to 40%, let the engine stabilize, and apply TOGA, which is the auto throttle takeoff go-around mode. He's going to call V1 and rotate. I'll rotate, then I'll call V2. Obviously, if we have an engine failure before V1, we'll abort. If we have it after V1, we'll continue. After I rotate, he's going to call positive rate. I'm going to call gear up, and then we're going to fly the noise abatement departure procedure. So I'll leave the flaps down until we get to 3,000, and then the flaps will go up, and I will fly V2 plus 10 until we get to 3,000. When we get to 3,000, I'll call bug up, and the speed bug will be increased to 250 knots, which is our climb speed below 10,000. Once the flaps are up and the gear is up and everything is settled for the climb, I will call for the after takeoff checklist and enable the autopilot. The autopilot will be in LNAV mode for lateral navigation and VNAV mode for vertical navigation. The VNAV mode that it will choose is VNAV speed, which means it will select a pitch. It'll pitch for climb speed of 250 knots, followed by Mach 0.78 once we get above 10,000. The lateral navigation mode will be, of course, the FMC, so it'll follow the FMC's flight path. Anyway, that's basically it. Above 10,000, he's going to ask if it's okay to release the cabin crew so that they can start drink service, and he'll ask if it's okay to release the passengers, the cabin, so they can use the bathroom. I'll just say yes to both of those unless there's like turbulence or something like that. I will also call for him to detune the navs so that the nav radio is no longer distracting us and picking up spurious signals above 10,000. And at 18,000, I'll call for transition. And once we're in cruise, since this is such a short flight, the moment we're in cruise, I'm going to start my descent planning and descent procedure since we don't have a whole lot of time. But I will cover that as we approach our cruise altitude. Anyway, let's get going. Clear left.
Clear right.
Runway entry procedure.
Check. Ready to go.
Takeoff.
Check.
There's Toga.
Thrust set.
N1.
Check. 80 knots.
Checked. Thrust hold.
Check. Beam up. Rotate. Positive right.
Gear up. LNAV.
Check.
Select VNAV.
VNAV.
Select LNAV. Bug up.
Bug up.
Select Command A.
Command A.
After takeoff. Flaps up. Flaps up.
Flaps up.
After takeoff checklist.
After takeoff checklist. Engine bleeds. On. Packs. Auto. Landing gear. Up and off. Flaps. Up. No lights. After takeoff checklist. Complete.
Okay. Hope you followed along. Anyway, as we can see here along the row, we've got N1 selected as our auto throttle mode. That's holding our climb.
Are you having to release the cabin crew?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, he's releasing the cabin crew. Until we get to 250 knots, then it should select VNAV speed. LNAV is our lateral navigation mode. It's following the course of the magenta line. And our vertical mode is VNAV speed, so it's only 250 knots. Oh, sorry, this is going to stay in N1. It's going to maintain our climb until we get to cruise. But as you can see here, VNAV speed is selecting a pitch for 250 knots at that current interval. Anyway, that's about that. We're going to cross 10,000 in just a bit. He's going to flip off the landing lights. So for him to turn on the fixed landing lights. That was a mistake on that part. Now that we are above all the terrain, we can turn on weather mode. once it hits 10,000, you'll see the bug go up again to 1.78.
Okay to release the cabin?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, he turned off the landing lights at 10,000, and I'm going to call for the navs to be detune.
Ladies and gentlemen, our
Detune the navs.
Roger.
Okay, next step is transition altitude.
All entertainment will commence shortly and will be available until we arrive at the gate. The complete selection of entertainment available is detailed
We can
flight
increase the
location located
zoom
on
here.
Now use your electronic devices as well as flight mode of selected flight aircraft.
FMC speed,
Check.
VNAV path.
Check.
So those two autopilot changes now. FMC speed, it's maintaining the speed in the FMC, which as you can see here, the target speed is 290 knots, 1.78 Mach. And VNAV path, it's, the reason it's doing a VNAV path is because we have a crossing restriction here. You can see it here, 12,000 or below, 12,000 or below. And so we have to maintain a path that keeps us below that crossing restriction. That's why it's selected VNAV path. It'll go back to VNAV speed once we've cleared that crossing restriction. Now, let's say hypothetically they gave us direct from fixed to risen. We don't have to go to KE. Well, all we have to do is take risen and just stick it up here where KE is, cut the corner, and hit execute. And now we've gone direct from fixed to risen. And we would do that in autopilot. Air traffic control is like, hey, you can cut the corner at KE. Of course, I did that a little wrong. What you're supposed to do is say confirm execute. And your co-pilot will look at what you've changed and confirm. And then you do it. Usually it's the co-pilot that does flight path changes. But of course, FS2 crew isn't that sophisticated. Anyway, climb's going to be a little quiet, at least until we get to cruise altitude, and then we'll start doing the second thing. Get ready for standard, or transition altitude.
Transition.
Set standard.
Standard set. Passing flight level 185. Now.
Check. Okay, we've just cross-confirmed our altimeters, so that means we're cleared into RVSM space, reverse vertical, or reduced vertical separation in space. As to confirm their altimeters are indicating correctly, which is good because RVSM space is anything above 28,000 and that's going up to 3,000. Well, the other thing I'm not doing is using the passenger announcement feature. They have some pre-recorded passenger announcements that don't have any information in it. Of course, they're pre-recorded, so good day. And you can also just make your own passenger announcements if you want. It really matters. I don't really know. Okay, so that's our top of climb bug here coming in just at 80 miles away. That's where we're going to reach 40,000 feet. You can also see that here on the climb screen. To top of the climb, 70 nautical miles, 1942. This green arc here is where we would reach our target altitude as put in on the MCP here, where we would reach that altitude at our current climb rate. Obviously, it's calculated a reduction in climb rate as we get higher, which is why the top of the climb is further out than the estimated altitude intercept mark there. Also, no weather anywhere. You can see our current winds here. We're fighting just a bit of a headwind, though it's really light actually for the south. 11 knots is a very light wind, but it's pretty early in the morning, which is why ground speed and true airspeed are close together. And you can see here that it's transitioned from the climb 1 derate to a normal climb, so at almost 100% power, so no derate at all. And we've gone back to VNAV speed mode after passing our crossing restrictions, so now we're climbing at our climb speed of 290 knots. That changeover point, when it goes from 290 knots to 0.78 Mach, is the point where those two are equal. So as you climb, obviously your indicated airspeed for a given true airspeed goes down, your indicated Mach for a given true airspeed goes up. And so when those two converge, that's the changeover point, and that's when it will go from holding an airspeed. If for whatever reason we needed to do a VX or a VY climb, we do that down here. That's max rate, max angle, and you can choose that if for whatever reason you need to. Those are extremely steep climbs, I would not recommend, unless you really needed to. And then if you had an engine out, you could just press this button and then execute, and it would do a engine out climb. So best efficiency climb for the engine. Pressurization, our target altitude here is 40,000 feet, and so the cabin pressure is increasing at a rate such that it will reach a cabin altitude of 7,000 feet, or 8,000 feet, maybe it's 6,000, I'm not sure. Once it, I guess it's 8,000, once it reaches a real altitude of 40,000 feet. If we go to the lower panel, you can see here we've got a cabin rate of climb of about 300 feet per minute, cabin altitude 3,000 feet right now, and a differential pressure of 7.8 psi. And so that cabin is slowly climbing. It should reach, I guess, 6,000. Tape goes up to, wait, sorry, cabin altitude. This one, 5,000. So yeah, should reach about 6,000 by the time we get up to 40,000. And then you set the landing altitude here. The co-pilot's taking care of all this for us. You set the landing altitude there, and the cabin will descend at an appropriate rate. SFO is obviously at sea level. Okay. Oh, here we go. Here's our flight. So at flight level 400, we expect a cabin altitude around 8,000. Oh, the other thing. I didn't use it at all on the takeoff. I'll use it for the arrival, but we have a HUD. Southwest Airlines puts HUDs on their aircraft, and we'll use this for the landing. It's not really strictly necessary unless you were doing a Category 2 or Category 3 approach, in which case you need the HUD to get lower minimums. And I know a lot of pilots probably aren't a huge fan of it, especially the older ones, so they probably leave it off unless they need to regulatorily. However, it's nice, and especially helps with landing. So we'll turn it on for landing. I completely forgot about it. The last 737 I flew was United, and United's really stingy with their 737s. Anyway, other than that, I'll just see you at top of the line.
1,000 level.
Okay, with 1,000 to go, as I mentioned, once we level off, I'm going to immediately start the descent procedure, which is basically I'm going to give him control, I'm going to give the co-pilot control. I don't think it actually does anything. I think you can just say you have control, but and then I'm going to, the first thing I'm going to do is replan the descent in PFPX with updated winds, because obviously the winds, wind and weather, because obviously that weather's changed. Normally you would start this procedure about 30 minutes from top of descent, about 150 miles from top of descent or so. But we're going to do it immediately because this is a very short flight. So we're coming up, so let's get ready. FMC speed.
Check.
VNAV path. Maintaining flight level 400 on standard. You have control?
I have control.
Okay, so I've set the maximum bank down to 10 degrees. In cruise, we typically use small banks. I'm going to pause now just so we can re-import the winds into PFPX. So basically all we have to do is reselect active sky. That reloads the winds. And then we can just replan the flight and recompute for a landing on 28 right. And then we can now calculate our landing performance. Okay, so what we're going to need is an updated landing weight. So what we can do is we're on the cruise page now. Cruise page tells us top of descent is 10 minutes away. That's no time at all. And we're going to have 6,600 pounds at SFO. So that's good enough for one go-around, which is good. If we go to the progress page, prog, you can see that at SFO, we'll be arriving at SFO around 2013 Zulu, so about 30 minutes from now. And we will have 6,600 pounds at SFO, as mentioned on the cruise page. So with that in mind, oh, and you can see on the cruise page that it's calculated at an optimal cruise speed given our cost index selection of 36. It's calculated a target speed of Mach 0.78, Mach 0.79, which it's holding here. Anyway, so 6,600 pounds at SFO. So all we have to do is add that to our zero fuel weight, 107.6 plus 6.6. That gives us a landing weight of 114.2. So we can dial that in here for more accurate landing data. It'll be flaps 40 landing, manual, air conditioning on, anti-ice off, runway 28 right, calculate. Okay, so now we have a VREF of 123 knots is what it's giving us. Still recommending max manual braking, but we still have sufficient margin for an auto brake 1 setting, which we will be using. So now we can apply that to our replanned flight. The other thing, since it's given us new winds, it's given us new descent forecast, descent wind information. So we can dial that in too, which we will. Anyway, let's unpause and go through the descent procedure. So first of all, we got to verify the landing altitude, set to 0. Then we set the transition level. So on descent forecast, transition level is flight level 180. That's the transition level everywhere in the United States. VREF, we can calculate that here. It's using our current gross weight, but we calculated, what did we calculate? Landing 114.2 as our landing weight. And it's giving us 123 as a VREF, which lines up with 123 there. So at 40, 123, we'll dial that in as our flattened speed setting. You can see it's displayed down here as our reference flattened speed, 40, 123. Okay, next up, radio and baro minimums. So let's pause again and let's go to the charts for SFO. The other thing we'd be doing right now, of course, is getting our arrival procedure from San Francisco and dialing that in, but that hasn't changed. We're still planning the Surfer 2 arrival, so we're not going to change anything about that. But let's take a look at the ILS 28 right. And as you can see, that has a minimum for a Category 1 approach of 220 feet. So we'll dial that in here in our minimums bug. Okay, that's dialed in. Nav radios, we're looking at 111.7 for the ILS frequency. So let's dial that in and tell him to as well. Set 111.7 on nav 2.
Set.
And the course is 284. You can see that right here. Set course on your side, 284.
Course 2847.
Okay, navigation radios and courses are set up for the ILS, and you can see that it's has the radio and course here, and it's just waiting to pick up the DME. Okay, check landing performance. We've already done that. Set auto brake is briefed. It's going to be auto brake 1. Initial descent altitude. So let's set up the descent, or the approach briefing. So we're arriving via star, ILS, landing flat 40, leads on final approach fix altitude. You can see that here, 1,800 feet at axial. And the minimum is 220, as we saw previously. Missed approach altitude here, 3,000. Runway conditions dry, we'll be using auto brake 1. ASD is used in San Francisco. We will not be doing a single engine taxi. It's great, but it's hard. It's a lot of turning. And we'll be parking at a gate, and we'll be using GPU. No concerns, no weather or terrain concerns. Yes, it will be our final sector. Okay. Now we just do a recall, verify there are no lights, And lastly, we can do our descent brief. Oh, sorry, one other thing. We have to set, roll down our altitude. It won't descend unless the altitude bug is set to a lower altitude. Normally we get a clearance like, pilot's discretion to flight level 220 or whatever, and we just leave that. But again, since we're not doing ATC, we're just going to let the autopilot go all the way down to the initial approach fix, or the final approach altitude, the intercept altitude of 1,800 feet. So we'll just roll it all the way down. Again, normally you would roll it down to whatever lower altitude you were cleared to. Okay, let's do the approach brief. Are you ready for the approach brief?
Ready.
Okay, this will be, we'll be flying the Surfer 2 arrival for runway 28 right. It'll be a visual approach to 28 right. We'll be using the ILS for situational awareness. It'll be flaps 40 for landing. Auto brake 1 will be in use. Weather is no factor for this approach. No abnormal configuration. The minimum safe altitude for the approach is somewhere on this chart. I don't know where it is on this chart. I hate the Lufthansa charts so much. Anyway, we'll pretend we know what the minimum safe altitude is. Transition level will be flight level 180. Our alternate is Oakland, and we will have 6,600 pounds of fuel available. And as I mentioned before, we will be planning a go-around followed by a return to the initial approach for landing, just to show you how that works. Any questions?
No questions.
Descent checklist.
Descent checklist. Pressurization. Landing altitude is 0 feet. Recall checked. Auto brake. Level 1. Landing data.
VREF 123. Minimums 220 feet.
Checked. Approach briefing.
Completed.
Descent checklist complete.
Okay, well, we got everything done in time before top of descent. We even have time to update the descent forecasting. So let's go to the descent page, forecast, and let's just verify, see if the winds have updated at all. It's a short flight. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't, but let's just take a look with the new winds. So at 310, it's 280 at 27, 230, it's 303 at 21, 15,000, 321 at 12. So yeah, we don't have new wind data, so we'll just leave the descent forecast as is. Go back to the cruise page, and we've got just 4 minutes until top of descent. So as you can see, VNAV mode is set to VNAV path. That's because our descent, we have a lot of altitude restrictions. You can see at Gnarly, we have to be to 0,000 or above. At Waves, we have to be exactly at 190. At Epic, exactly at 15,000. At Eddy, 6,000 and above. And we can verify that by taking a look at the Surfer 2 arrival. And yeah, Gnarly, 20,000 above. Waves, between 15,000 and 19,000. And it actually has that. You can see that here, 15,000 and 19,000. And 280 knots. That's what it says here at 280 knots. Epic, 10 to 15 at 280 knots. And then Eddy, 6,000 or above at 240 knots. So both speed and altitude windows. And so we got a lot of descent planning that we would have to do if we didn't have an FMC. We do have an FMC. It handles all the descent planning for us. All we have to do is just let it be in VNAV path and FMC speed for the auto throttle mode, and it will take care of everything. Now, I've flown this arrival before. Getting from Epic to Eddy, so above 10,000 to, getting from Epic to Eddy, so above 10,000 restriction here, and then downstream a 4,000 foot restriction at Menlo, and while also slowing from 280 to 240, the flight planner often has trouble. So in other airplanes, depending on loadouts, depending on size of the airplane, the FMC will complain and it will say something like unable 240 knots at Eddy. And it's basically telling you that it doesn't think it can both descend and slow down based on its internal calculations. When that happens, I just leave it alone and I just use the speed brake. Sometimes I have to go, speed brake all the way down to the flight detent here just to make sure that I can get it down to 240 knots by Eddy. But you do what you got to do to get it down. And it looks like it hasn't been complaining at all so far. So it seems to think it can make all the speed restrictions without using the speed brakes. But of course, we will see. And I will be ready to use speed brakes as necessary to make sure that I meet these speed restrictions as I do the Surfer 2 arrival. Okay, once it reaches top of descent, the auto throttle mode is going to go to retard, and it's going to bring the throttles all the way back, and then it's going to set them to thrust armed, and it'll be armed and ready to maintain descent speed. And we are just about there, 3 miles to top of descent. And why not? Let's just do a little passenger announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a flight deck. In a few minutes, we'll begin our descent to our destination, and we're going to turn on the fasten seatbelt sign. And we do ask that you keep your seatbelt fastened.
Okay, there we go, retard
the
mode. Throttles will come back automatically. Let's turn off, let's go back to the radio, PA. And you can see here on the MFD, if we take a bit closer look, this is our vertical performance. This is where we're supposed to be, and this is where we are on our vertical track. This is our required navigational performance in the vertical dimension, 400 feet, and our actual performance is 166 feet of accuracy. And then in the lateral dimension, we require 2 nautical miles of lateral accuracy for the approach. We have 0.07 nautical miles of accuracy. All right, arm. Okay, so the thrust mode is armed. LNAV and VNAV path are still active. Okay, let's talk about the descent a bit. So again, once we reach transition level, we will set local altimeter and then go back to, and then do an altimeter check again. Normally, of course, the altimeter setting would be fed to you by ATC. Since we don't have ATC, I'm just going to use ActiveSky to look up the local altimeter in my area. When we reach 10,000, the co-pilot will turn on the landing lights and secure the cabin, so we'll call for everyone to get in their seats. And then when we reach, and then the FMC will have calculated a deceleration point, so a point where we need to start decelerating, bringing down gear and flaps, and preparing for the approach. When we reach that point, the speed bug will automatically decrease to the flaps up speed, and the FMC will try to slow us down to the flaps up speed. And then as I bring flaps down, it will automatically slow us down to the next speed and the next speed after that, until it gets us down to VREF. If that doesn't work for whatever reason, I will turn off the auto throttle and I will just call for the co-pilot to set the speed bug as necessary for each flap speed. We'll do an approach checklist below 10,000 and we'll do a landing checklist just before landing. We've got full gear and flaps. We will do an altimeter check at the final approach point, and the co-pilot will also critique me and call whether I'm stable or unstable. In real life, you have to discontinue the approach if you're unstable. I will try as hard as I can to be stable for the approach, and I get to do it twice, which means I have 2 opportunities to screw up. I will turn off the autopilot and start hand flying the aircraft, kind of just before we get to, just before we intercept the final approach course, and I will hand fly it down the final approach course. I will switch over to the approach mode for the autopilot and for the displays. Oh, the other thing we need to do is configure the HUD. We don't really have to do this because we're not flying an ILS approach, but we can. If we go to the center console, center pedestal, what we can do is we can configure the length and width of the runway and the glide slope so that it draws us a virtual runway in the HUD. We do that here. So runway elevation, let's go back to the ILS, 28 right. Touchdown zone elevation, we can see that here, that's 13 feet. Dial that in. And the runway length is 3527 meters. If I can move Lufthansa. That's 11,571 feet. Yeah. And it is indeed a 3-degree glide slope. So with that data, we can get a virtual runway drawn into the HUD, which of course in cloudier conditions would help us locate the real runway. But we won't need that here on this clearly visual approach, but you know, it's nice to show you. This is the active and standby HUD modes. Active HUD mode is Pri, that's basically just the primary mode for normal visual flying. Standby mode is an auto land IMC, and so that's the full auto land, like you get the virtual runway, you get the height above touchdown, everything you need for an auto land. We'll go ahead and use that HUD mode even though we're not doing an auto land, but we'll use the HUD mode anyway. And you can see the active HUD mode. Well, there's too much sun glare, but somewhere you can see the active HUD mode. Right, I will also use this opportunity to talk a little bit about the missed approach since things will get busy as we get closer to the airport. So what's going to happen is when we reach minimums, he'll call minimums. I'll call go around flaps 15, and then he'll call positive rate. I'll call gear up, check thrust, and he'll verify that I have full operating toga thrust on both engines. When we do that, LNAV will come back alive. LNAV mode here will come back alive. Approach mode will disengage, and we'll be able to fly the missed approach using the GPS and LNAV. I will do a normal noise abatement departure procedure climb, just as specified. At 3,000 feet, I'll engage the autopilot, and it will fly the missed approach and hold. While that's happening, I will set up that same approach all over again in the FMC Menlo transition to the ILS. And then I will pretend as if ATC was giving me vectors, so I'll switch the autopilot to heading hold mode, and I will fly some headings to get me back to Menlo. Once I'm back at Menlo, I'll go back to approach mode and fly the approach again. Remember, we still got to do after takeoff checklists and approach checklists and all that. So things move quickly. Got to do a bunch of stuff in a quick, short period of time. Got Monterey Bay. We're over Monterey Bay now. That's half of the bay up ahead. And you can see, you know, the South Bay here, the peninsula, San Francisco, over the East Bay. Our approach is going to take us over the South Bay to the bay itself.
Cdu Pre-Flight.
Okay, anyway, sorry, we are approaching 18,000, so let's get our local altimeter, and from active sky, it's 2997. Let's queue that up so we can dial it in. So even though it's set to standard, we can still dial in 2997 as a standby altimeter. We can't do that on the backup altimeter here. We can dial it in as a standby altimeter setting so that when we press the standard button, toggle it out, it goes immediately to 2997. All right, we're approaching transition mode. So let's set 2997 and 2997.
Transition.
Set altimeters. Set altimeters.
2997. Set. Passing altitude 16,900. Now.
Checked. Coming up on the South Bay here. Sorry about the scenery. PMDG takes up so much virtual address space that my VAS usage is off the charts unless I disable all my custom scenery. I have all this wonderful, beautiful San Francisco scenery that I can't use with PMDG, or else I get out of memory errors. So I've disabled everything except PMDG and FS2 Pro, ground services, and the other plugins that we've seen we use today. It's unfortunate. Prepar3D version 4 is a 64-bit application. That's the rumor. So they should increase the virtual address space and use more add-ons simultaneously. Anyway, as we approach 10,000 feet, Copilot will secure the cabin and turn back on landing lights. Let's decrease the zoom a little bit.
The cabin is secure.
Thank you. Okay, cabin secure. That sound you heard was the flight deck door being locked to kind of simulate the flight first officer popping her head in. Sorry, not the stewardess popping their head in and letting you know that the cabin's secure. If you're wondering why I'm using Australian voices, the non-normals and emergency procedures, the CRN for those are only supported with the Australian voice pack, so you have to use Australian voices for that. We aren't simulating any non-normals, no engine failures, no hydraulics failures, no pressurization problems, nothing like that. On this flight, I turned off all failures just to make this flight a little bit more predictable. Normally, I fly with random failures turned on and service-based failures turned on. And if something pops up, FS2 crew will properly handle interaction between the captain and first officer as they troubleshoot the problem, which is nice. We got to use drag. You can see we're way above the speed bug, so I'm going to put in full flight detent. And we're going to get that speed below, we have to be below 250, below 10,000 feet anyway, so let's get that speed down and get it back to the speed mode, which you can see here. And now it's as good a time as any to turn off the autopilot. So 2 taps of the disconnect button. And then it's just a matter of keeping the flight path marker here inside the tab hole. Just flying. Okay, now that we've reached 240, I'm going to open the speed brake, or close the speed brake just a bit. The other thing to watch out for is the trim. The autopilot's been changing the trim, and in the simulation, obviously, it doesn't move your real-life trim well. So I'm going to nudge the trim and just see how far off it is. This might be awful. Okay, not so bad. Trims are covered. Get the approach checklist going. Approach checklist.
Altimeters.
2997 set.
2997 set. Approach checklist complete.
So further decrease the zoom. Okay, you can see the deceleration point up ahead on the MFD. That's where we're going to want to start putting out our flaps in gear, decelerating to VREF according to the calculated performance. Arm approach.
Approach arm.
Okay, MCP speed.
Check.
Glide path.
Check.
Okay, it's intercepted the glide path, and we have VOR localizer armed and MCP speed set. So now it's following the speed on the MCP here, which is 240. When we reach the deceleration point, we will bug down to the flaps 1 speed. Drag required after Menlo, that's not a big deal.
Glide slope live.
Checked. Coming up on the decel point, we'll set flaps up speed in a bit. Set flaps up speed.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. Fine, I'll do it myself. Normally, Copilot's supposed to handle all MCP changes when you are flying and the autopilot is off.
5,000.
Checked. They're responding to his call for 5,000 above field elevation. Let's put it in approach mode. Menlo transition here. Approaching the flaps up speed and remove flaps 1. Flaps 1, set speed.
Flaps 1.
And then we just bring the flaps down in increments. Over 10, we're cleared the land. Cleared. Cleared.
Localizer alive. Check.
Checked. Visual.
Check.
Flaps 5, set speed. Flaps 5, set speed. Flaps 5.
Flaps 5. 1000 level. Check.
Actually, let's just take the bug all the way down to VREF. Set VREF plus 0.
Set.
Once we get to flaps 5, I'll call gear down. Gear down, flaps 15.
Gear down. Flaps 15. Speed brake up.
Okay, the VOR mode's gone active, and the HUD is showing me a 3-degree glide slope. Next up is just flying the speed at VREF and the localizer down to the runway. You can see our barometric altitude, vertical speed, and our radar altitude will come in a bit when that B goes away. Set missed approach altitude.
Missed approach altitude set.
Flaps 40.
Flaps 40.
Landing checklist.
Landing checklist. Engine start switches.
Continuous.
Speed brake.
Armed.
Landing gear.
Down.
Flaps.
Flaps 40.
Flaps 40. Stable.
Yeah, he called this stable, yay. Okay, we're in the crosshairs. That's our 3-degree glide slope. And it shows us our altitude, and we're looking for 220 as our minimums, then we'll do the go around. $500 for 220. $400 for 220. Hold on 1 second, I just want to verify something. Yeah, we were in the wrong mode. That's going to affect things. Saratoga. Go around, flaps 15.
Positive rate.
Gear up, check thrust.
Gear up, thrust set.
Select LNAV.
LNAV.
Select VNAV.
VNAV.
Okay, now it's flying to missed approach. We're just waiting for it to get to 3,000 and then we'll turn on the autopilot. Flaps up.
Flaps up.
I should have been raising the flaps in
There's
increments
a little.
as the speed went up, but I forgot to do that. So I'm just going to get them all up now. Just waiting for the flaps to come up before I select autopilot. Select LNAV. Select Command A.
Command A.
Okay, everything's set up. After takeoff checklist.
After takeoff checklist. Engine bleeds on. Packs. Auto. Landing gear up and off. Flaps up. No lights. After takeoff checklist complete.
Okay, it's gonna maintain our holding speed and maintain 3,000. Now what we're gonna do is set an arrival back in San Francisco.
Are you happy to release the cabin crew?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And we're gonna do the ILS 28 right from Menlo again. It says cruise altitude change to 4,000 because we need to be at 4,000 at Menlo. That's okay. Let's check our route. It doesn't know how to get to Menlo. We'll just execute. We'll leave the discontinuity for now because we're going to use vectors anyway. FMC says drag required after Menlo. That's fine. And reset MCP altitude. We'll reset it to 4,000.
1,000 level.
And we'll do an altitude intervene so it starts climbing. Okay, let's start our vectors. Let's set our heading back about that direction. Choose heading select. Heading select.
Check.
Okay, it's climbing to 4,000 at VNAV speed, and it's on heading select mode, and the pitch lever's at N1, or the auto throttle's at N1. And, well, now it's at FMC speed. But, once it levels off, it's going to go to VNAV path. There we go, VNAV path and FMC speed. Okay, we're just going to get a little bit of lateral offset from Menlo so that we have room to turn onto the inbound course, the transition course. And then we're going to fly it all again and land. All right, let's cycle the FS2 crew mode back to landing checklist. Oh, I think I know what the problem is. I think I'm supposed to say cleared after I do the landing checklist, and then it will cycle into the landing mode, and then I will get the, because, you know, he didn't call out minimums. He's supposed to call out minimums. He didn't call out when we reached the initial approach altitude. He's supposed to do all that. Okay, that's probably about enough lateral separation. Let's commence another left turn here. That's our heading to about there. That's good. Now we would be prepping for the approach right now, but since it's the exact same approach, everything should be set up. We're a little bit lighter weight, so we would technically need to recalculate our VREF, but I don't think it's changed that much.
Check.
Yeah, it's gone down one whole knot.
Roger.
I think some saying things. yeah, I should put on terrain mode because we are low to the ground. Okay, and ILS frequencies are still set up, HUD's still set up. Yeah, minimums are still set, everything's still ready. Okay, so what's going to happen is once we're in a position where we can make an easy turn onto Menlo, so right about at the 20-mile tick there, we are just going to take Menlo and bring it up to the top. That's the same as saying direct to Menlo. And then we are going to go back to LNAV mode, and that should fly the turn onto Menlo, followed by the transition. And we will arm approach mode, of course, as well. If you missed what actually happened during the go-around, first I pressed the toga switch, that's right here, this little switch there. That sets toga thrust, and then I set a 15-degree climb rate, and I called go-around flaps 15. So the co-pilot immediately set the flaps to 15, I set a 15-degree pitch and climb thrust. Then I called gear up, check thrust, he verified both the engines were operating at normal go-around thrust and brought the gear up. Then what I should have done, of course, is bring the flaps up in increments. From 15 up to 0, but I forgot that and I just brought them all up at once as we approached the flaps up speed. No big though, I'm sure the passengers did not notice. It's Crystal Springs Reservoir. Oh, the other thing we could have briefed is the expected arrival routing. So let's do that now. I'm going to pause and, damn it, mouse look. Okay, so I'm going to pause and we're going to take a look at our expected arrival and taxi routing. So basically this guy flew into gate 25. If we go to the San Francisco aircraft parking chart here, we can see that gate 25 somewhere, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, 25. Okay, so it's going to be here at Terminal 1, Concourse B, 22, 24, 23, 25. Where the hell is 25? Ah, here it is. So it's right here on the elbow of Concourse B. So when we come off 28 right, we're going to cross 28 left, and we're going to go down Alpha. We're going to go all the way around the terminal on Alpha, and then we're going to make a right off Alpha to gate 25. So that's going to more or less be our routing. And on the AGC, sorry, not the temporary AGC, the AGC 28 right. We'll probably cross like Quebec or Kilo or something, and just take it down to Alpha, go all the way around on Alpha to the elbow here. Okay, so that's going to be our expected arrival or taxi routing. I guess I could have done that while on pause to save a little time, since we don't have a lot to do right now. Okay, let's cheat right just a bit. And we'll get ready to make the turn onto Menlo here, like you can see. Turn there. Once it's a beam. Normally, of course, ATC would be worrying about terrain, but I'm the one who's worrying about terrain here. All right, let's do it. Let's put Menlo at the top for a direct route and then execute. Confirm, execute.
Confirm.
Okay, selected LNAV. Drag required after Menlo, that's cool, we know that. And let's get ready to turn off the autopilot.
Bank angle.
Arm approach mode.
Approach arm.
We gotta start slowing down, so I'm gonna call for a speed intervene. Speed intervene.
Check.
Speed intervene.
Check.
With speed intervene set, I take control of the airspeed on the MCP. You can see the HUD never cycled back into Pry. I never bothered to do that. It's still an Auto 3. That's why we don't have the tadpole. So I'm flying with the flight director bars on the PFD instead. Okay, approach mode's active. Local or lateral approach mode's active. Localizer. Glide slope's alive. And glide slope. Glide slope.
Check.
Flaps 1.
Flaps 1.
Vertical set speed.
Check.
Okay, I got my tadpole now. That approach and glide slope are armed. And now we just slow it down, just like before, and fly the approach. This time to a landing. Flaps 5, set speed. Flaps 5.
Flaps 5.
I should not be the one setting altitude and speed. He should be the one doing it while I'm hand flying.
Final approach fix, height checked, missed approach altitude not set.
Set missed approach altitude. Gear down, flaps 15.
Gear down, flaps 15. Speed brake up.
Set missed approach altitude.
Missed approach altitude set.
Set VREF plus 0.
Set.
Flaps 40.
Flaps 40.
I've taken control of the throttles. I'm not going to use the auto throttle will normally also retard and flare in an auto land, and automatically retard in a normal landing, but I will take control of the throttles for this approach.
Not stable.
Yeah, see, now he thinks we're not stable. Landing checklist.
Landing checklist. Engine start switches.
Continuous.
Speed brake.
Armed.
Landing gear.
Down.
Flaps.
Flaps 40.
Flaps 40.
If the speed brake is armed, it will automatically deploy after touchdown. Cleared.
Check.
Okay, now we got a great stable approach.
Check. Speed brake up.
Reversers aren't coming up.
Reverser checklist. Condition: a fault occurs in the thrust reverser system. Note: additional system failures may cause in-flight deployment.
He's doing some
Expect
checklist.
normal reverser operation after landing. Reverser checklist complete.
Manual braking.
Reverses normal. 60 knots. Check.
Ladies and gentlemen, for your safety and the safety of those
Master
around
caution
you,
ADRs.
remain
Confirmed.
seated with your seatbelt fastened and keep the aisles and exits clear until the seatbelt signs are turned off.
Okay, had a little
Take
issue
care
with the
when opening
reversers,
overhead
but
lock
otherwise it was
as
a decent
items may have
landing.
moved during our flight. Mobile phones may now be used on board and smoking is not permitted inside.
Let's go to
the
Alpha
vehicle.
and go
Thank you
around
for
the
inquiring
terminal
us. It's been our
to gate
pleasure
25.
looking
Let's set up for
after you
parking.
today. On behalf of your crew,
Clear
we
left.
wish you a safe onward
Clear
journey
right.
and hope to see you again.
See, what was it in? APC gate 25 was Bravo. Okay. It set up a parking equipment at gate 25 for us now, so now we can just follow taxiway Alpha to the gate. Cycle flight directors. Reset the barrows.
Check.
Cycle flight directors.
Recycling the flight directors. Alright, there's our guys. They're waiting for us. That's 3 minutes.
That 3-minute timer was in case we wanted to do a single engine taxi, which we're not going to do. Not this one, next one. Lights and doors.
Check.
Just disarming the doors and turning off the taxi lights so don't blind the guy.
Cabin crew, disarm doors and cross-check. Doors disarmed, no APU.
No APU because SFO is ground power. Alright, now we just follow the parking director in. He's very critical. He's going to be yelling at us for something or another. Alright. We're going to wait for ground power to be applied before we shut down engine number 1. Alright, ground power is connected. Both engines are offline. And I parked a bit too far. He doesn't like it. Okay, I'll just wait for the co-pilot, then we'll do the shutdown checklist and the securing checklist, and then we're done. Shutdown checklist.
Shutdown checklist. Fuel pumps off. Propane off. Hydraulic panel set. Flaps up. Parking brake.
Set.
Engine start levers.
Cut off.
Weather radar
Off.
off. Shutdown checklist complete.
Secure the aircraft, please.
Check.
Bye, thank you for a wonderful flight.
You too.
Secure checklist.
Secure checklist. IRSs off. Emergency exit lights off. Window heat
Bye,
off.
thank you for a
Packs
wonderful
off.
flight.
Secure checklist complete.
Okay, now all we have to do is turn off ground power and then battery. We're done.
You too.
All right, aircraft is secured. We are free to leave it and go get a lunch at SFO before what will presumably be another crew taking it over for a return flight. Anyway, that's that. So you can see GSX, they are unloading the bags and unloading the passengers from the wrong door, but whatever. That's how we do the PMDG 737 NGX with Active Sky, PFPX, Ground Services X, and all the other stuff that I did in Prepar3D version 3. Thanks a lot for watching.